Everyone's panicking about AI stealing jobs, but smart companies are thinking bigger. What if AI helped your people crush it? Lattice is where people and AI team up to help employees grow, managers lead, and companies win. No regrets. Check out lattice.com/no regrets. That's LATTICE.com/no regrets.
If you take care of your people, they'll take care of your company. And everything else is commentary. That is the essence of running a good business, like, standing on one foot. And, I think being proactive in promotions is sort of the first best thing to do. If you can offer someone a pay increase or a title increase before they're expecting it, wow, that like pays dividends.
Having conversations about pay can feel really daunting, whether you're a professional hoping to advocate for yourself or a manager striving to build trust and transparency. And you can imagine just trying to build up that confidence to even bring up the subject overall. Yet, as data from SHRM's latest employee benefits survey reveals, the world of compensation and benefits is rapidly evolving, bringing both fresh opportunities and new challenges to the table. We'll unpack the latest trends in pay, explore negotiation strategies that work, and tackle psychological and social barriers that often stand in the way of meaningful dialogue. Today, we're joined by Ben Zweig, CEO of Revelio Labs and author of Job Architecture: Building a Language for Workforce Intelligence. His expertise in labor market analytics and occupational transformation will help us make sense of what is exactly changing here and what you can do to prepare. So, Ben, welcome to All Things Work.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, Ben, it's really great to have you on this episode. We know that this can get complex when people start to maybe overthink it a little bit. So we'll try to simplify it and provide great guidance here. Let's start from the employee's perspective. It's a lot of our audience tuning in. Let's dive in by talking about how you can approach pay negotiation by using data. For example, the SHRM's latest employee benefits survey from 2025 shows healthcare, retirement, and flexible work arrangements. They came out as the top valued benefits. And that's actually a trend SHRM has been seeing year after year. So this is something that's been staying really true and consistent for employees and for employers. So from your perspective, how can professionals use data like this report to prepare for negotiations when discussing pay and even benefits with their employer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, employees, job seekers really need to be as informed as the other side of the market, and very often are not. So I would say for any negotiation, you really need to know what's even on the table. And of course, pay, direct money, like that is a factor that people care about, but there's also all sorts of other factors that people care about, like you mentioned. So a lot of the information about what types of non-compensation forms of total rewards companies offer are out there in the public domain. Get data from Glassdoor, from wherever, just to know, what do people like about this company? What do they not like? How powerful is the credential? What are the exit options? What's the work-life balance? Like, all of these things matter. And sometimes you're not going to get what you want from a certain company. So, if you really care about work-life balance, and that's just not the way it operates at Goldman Sachs, don't bother, don't even look. So, make sure you're looking in the right places. And then, again, with any negotiation, we're also trying to find out what's valuable to you that is inexpensive for the company to offer, and what is not so valuable to you that the company might value a lot. So that's the essence of good negotiation, is finding a good way to partner to get everyone to win.
And that really reminds me. So I would go through job interviews on a personal note, and my older sister, I would always call her because she was so good at these things. And I would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. What if they ask me what I'm expecting with pay? Like, I don't know how to answer that with coming off. Like, I'm afraid that they're gonna not want me if I mention a certain range or something like that." And she always told me, you always tell them, you're looking at the whole package. You're not just looking at just salary, not just looking
Ooh,
at
it's a
just
good
the
answer.
specific benefits. You're talking about how the culture fit also benefits you as well. Benefits go beyond that as well. So like you said, researching the company, being smart about like what you already know about them and what the reviews say. So I think, I love that you brought that up. It really just reminds me of what I've been told kind of when I was nervously going into these types of situations. So I think a lot of us can walk away with that useful advice.
I think it's a great point. Also, I mean, pay directly is very often like not being negotiated directly anymore because of pay
Mhm.
transparency. Because
Yeah.
now it's all this new legislation that you have to list pay ahead of time.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, there's still some negotiation,
Yeah.
on direct compensation, but it's more about those other factors now than it was
Hmm.
in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think pay transparencies, played a big role. And that kind of dives into the next question. For some, negotiating pay and benefits can be really intimidating, like how I felt that intimidation personally. You don't really know how to start the conversation. How do you approach this? You don't want to be too casual, like, hey, what are the bennies? But you also don't want to be, maybe you don't want to take it so seriously to the point where you're almost paralyzing yourself. So let's break it down a little bit. What are some of those psychological and social barriers that may prevent individuals from actually advocating for themselves successfully?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I mean, interviews are tough because they are two-sided, but they feel one-sided. So, candidates really feel like they are trying to, impress employers. But the employer also feels like they have to sell the opportunity to the candidate. I mean, as someone who interviews a lot, I mean, you know, there are definitely some people where I leave that interview thinking I will bend over backwards for this person. Like I really want them. And whatever we put in the pay range, I just like, am willing to be flexible on that because they're awesome. And then other people where, I feel the opposite and I feel like, I know we listed this pay and like maybe, it's kind of an uncertain bet and, maybe they'll be a good fit, but who knows? And, I don't want to like take a chance if it's at a high price point. So, you gotta like feel out the situation and it's very tough to like legitimately connect with someone when you're in this kind of forced performative relationship. But I think it is possible. Like my recommendation is really to try to break down that formality and really try to connect with someone deeply because number one, it's just a way to build connection and present yourself well, but also it's a way to get information because then someone's guard is down and they'll tell you the real deal. They'll open up about how they feel, how they're leaning. One thing some people ask in interviews is, can you tell me what you're thinking of my candidacy right then and there? I've had people ask me, like, do you think do you think I've got the right skills for this role? Like, what do you think? I don't know if I would go so far as to recommend that approach, but if the moment strikes, it's not that crazy.
Do you have any other, tactics, practical steps that people can really take to try to overcome these barriers, especially when it comes to maybe that confidence they're trying to boost right there and then to do it?
Yeah, I once heard a quote. I forget who said it, but they said that you should be applying for the job above your job that you're applying for. So think about yourself as applying for the job that you will grow into. Because really a good candidate is someone that can exceed expectations and like rise to, greater challenges and take initiative and all that. So I think by kind of being ambitious in what you want to do in that role, that kind of forces the conversation about like how much opportunity is there for me to create more value for the organization? How can I play a bigger role? How can I be as productive as possible? How can I grow? And I think that is nice to hear from, as an employer. You like to see, oh, this is someone who's gonna crush it.
let's move on to some practical strategies. So, Ben, can you walk us through, the step-by-step process you recommend for professionals who are getting ready to negotiate their compensation and benefits if they're considering a new role at a different organization?
Yeah. So I think I think it's worth remembering that like what we get out of a job is not just the pay. We are not simply, transacting money for time. We are getting something that is going to live on our resume forever. We are getting a credential, we're getting experience, we get to be surrounded by people, who we may want to learn from. So I would say the first thing is to, think about the job holistically, and then put your best foot forward, of course, and present yourself well, and very seriously evaluate the position, the company, the industry, the role, all the different facets of satisfaction. Do plenty of research. And again, there's so much data to
Yeah.
check out. And then yeah, as going through this negotiation, I would say, focus on the things that are more important to you than they they cost to the company, and vice versa. The things that are not as important to you and you're willing to, take a hit on, but might be very costly for a company to concede on. So choose your battles wisely. Pay attention to the comparative advantages, and be bold, but also, sensitive and pay attention to the nuances. So yeah, I mean, all of that is maybe fairly generic advice, but hard to sometimes keep it all in mind when you're going through this kind of high stakes, high pressure, situation.
Now let's go to the other situation that a lot of people find themselves in. They've been at a company for a few years, they really led, these high visibility projects, and now they're feeling, I can do more. I can get paid more for what I do. That's a promotion opportunity. And they're trying to, almost like hype themselves up into approaching that conversation because it is so intimidating because you don't want to come off like too cocky, but you do want to come off confident enough to say, hey, I deserve this. And also the company deserves me to be promoted as well for business goals. So how would you suggest a person really approach that conversation with their direct manager or whoever above?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just had a newsletter on this that that what really dictates someone's career growth is whether they are in a company that promotes aggressively or not. So, choosing the right company from the get-go is important. So I want to sort of caveat this and say, like, make sure you're in the place that encourages, internal upward mobility, because some organizations don't or can't. So being in the right environment, I'd say, is first and foremost. But then, I think as you're going through these conversations, I think the focus should really be on your contribution. I think the best approach is to kind of use the language of contribution, and talk about your value, how much you know, maybe have done for the company, how much you can continue to do for the company or the group, and just, be bold, and be, don't hold back, and paint the picture for them about, what you can do if you're given a bigger, more responsibility, a bigger role, more discretion, because that's really what it's about. I think the worst way to approach this conversation is like, well, I kind of been here for a year or 2 years, and it seems like the right time for me to get a pay increase. So like, when am I going to get that?
So let's take the labor market into perspective here. We're all thinking about it. On top of all this confidence approaching the conversations, the labor market is impacting not only how we're treating our jobs, but how companies are functioning essentially. So you wrote a book, and I'm going to bring the title back here, Job Architecture: Building a Language for Workforce Intelligence. Can you share some themes from your book that could be applied to the employee perspective about, pay equity?
Yeah, for sure. So really the essence of the book is about taxonomies and standardizing occupations. I think, before being a labor economist and in people analytics, I worked in finance. I was at a hedge fund, and in finance, everyone's got their Bloomberg terminal. They're all looking at the same data in a standardized way. And that is not the case in labor markets. We don't have that same ubiquity and standardization. And I think there are a lot of reasons why that's not the case, but one primary reason is because there are millions and millions of people in the world that standardize financial market data, and they are called accountants. That is like a role that we all know exists. We're very familiar
Right,
with it.
right.
And they are standardizers. They standardize information so that it can be consumed. And with labor markets, we really don't have that. We don't have a good common language for what is this job? What do they do? How does it progress? Like when people talk about a job, sometimes we know what it means, but very often we don't. And it's getting even harder because the occupational landscape is transforming. There's so many people that take a job, and then 6 months later, they find themselves doing a totally different set of things. So the work activity, the task mix within jobs change very rapidly. So there's a big challenge in how to standardize jobs, how to standardize information. So that in my mind is really the essence of standardization and ultimately equity and comparability. So if we're interested in pay equity, we need to benchmark people who do the same work to other people who do that work. So we need a category of people that should be paid the same amount, that do the same collection of things. And we think of that as an occupation. Like an occupation is a cluster of similar jobs, and jobs are similar if they have the same work activities, if they have the same tasks. So that's really, I think, the way to think about it, the way I recommend thinking about it. And once we're able to standardize, then pay benchmarks and ultimately, equity becomes a lot easier.
I'd love to get into a few scenarios to see how both employees and people managers can approach these difficult conversations about pay. But first, let's take a quick pause for a brief message about a related SHRM learning opportunity for our HR professionals tuning in today. Hey everyone, today's episode dives into pay and benefits. But as an HR professional, how do you become your organization's go-to expert in these areas? SHRM's Total Rewards Specialty Credential is designed for HR practitioners who want to master the evolving landscape of employee compensation, benefits, development, and recognition. This credential equips you with the skills to build competitive, equitable, and engaging rewards programs that drive business results. If you're watching on YouTube, just click the link above to learn more or check out the episode description for details. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Let's walk through some real-world scenarios managers, might face, and let's hear your advice on how to respond really with empathy and effectiveness. So, scenario number one, this is around an employee coming to you about remote work. We know that this is a common discussion. So, they say, I've noticed that flexible work arrangements are becoming more common in our industry. Based on my research, I believe a hybrid schedule could help me maintain productivity and work-life balance. Let's say an ideal scenario, you have the authority to approve this. What steps would you recommend a manager take to approach the conversation and ensure the flexible work arrangement is set up for success for both of them?
Yeah. So I happen to agree. So it's a little hard for me. I think flexible work arrangements are very productive for society. I think there's like lots of great research on that. But to the extent that there are some downsides, I would be very upfront about those downsides and say, well, on Tuesdays, we usually have this meeting. And it's really good when we can whiteboard and brainstorm. And, I'm a little worried about that. And, if you're commuting at this time, something usually comes in and, I really need to get in touch with you and blah, blah, blah. Like whatever the concerns are, I would I would be very upfront about those concerns and then wait for a reaction. Because, this person might have a unique view of what that means to them. They might say, "Oh yeah, that's totally fine. I was just talking about like, walking my dog at lunch." Like maybe that's all they want. In which
Right.
case, no problem. Or maybe they really want to like move upstate and be, not local, in which case that's a major concern because they're probably not gonna, like they may say, "Oh, it's fine. I could like commute in twice a week and commute an hour and a half." But is that really sustainable? I would think not. So if there are requirements around, being in the office 1, 2, 3 times a week, then, it's probably worth getting to the bottom of what they are really looking for.
Mm-hmm. That's smart. Yes. So let's say the next scenario is around professional development opportunities, another big topic for us here. So let's say your employee says, I'm interested in advancing my skills and have identified a higher education program relevant to my role. I would very much like to explore whether the company could support tuition reimbursement. Now, to jump off of this, SHRM's latest employee benefit survey found almost half of organizations, approximately 45%, offer undergraduate or graduate tuition assistance. So, in this scenario, however, your organization does not have this type of reimbursement benefit. So, how would you recommend a manager really approach this conversation to empathetically, but also clearly explain, how this is handled in the company?
Yeah. So, and I think I've seen that share is actually declining. Like reimbursement is less common than it used to be, which is kind of an interesting trend. I mean, I think I think it depends a lot on the company culture, but I'll share from my experience because in my company we don't offer reimbursement, and I think my response, and then I'll try to generalize it from there. But starting with my own personal biases, is that there's a lot to learn on the job, and there's a lot of ways to learn something. So formal education is one path of many paths, and now it's becoming easier and easier to learn on the job, to develop expertise in new emerging skills. And if someone wants to, if someone says, "Oh, I really want to, figure out how to use Claude Code and like vibe code an app,"
Uh-huh.
then I mean, this is a little bit of a harsh response, but I think I would say, great, go for it. Like, do it, nights and weekends. And, if you become better at your job and more productive, then fantastic. Everybody wins. And, you'll eventually be more valuable and get paid more. And, that's an investment that you can make. My skepticism around formal education is that it's probably more valuable as a credential than as an actual way to learn. And that makes me think that it may be used to, you know, send a signal to future employers and have more external labor market power, which, doesn't seem like the smart thing to subsidize as a current employer. So yeah, I'd say like for our kind of culture where we pay people more if they're doing better, I'd say that answer is fine. Um, I also think it's okay to say, sorry, that's not our policy, nothing I could do.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes being a little straightforward
Yeah. Yeah.
is okay. It's okay. Okay, so final scenario. Let's say an employee comes to you and directly asks for that promotion. We mentioned how the employee can approach this. Now the people manager side. However, you know that promotion is really not possible in the immediate future due to budget constraints, which we know companies are facing right now, or other factors that may be really outside your control as a people manager. How would you recommend this person really approach this conversation, acknowledging the limitation, but also trying to maintain engagement within that employee?
Yeah. There's an expression that this reminds me of where someone says, if someone if someone asks you for a promotion and you say no, it's almost too late. You almost lost that person. So that's it's very hard to recover from that. Like if no is the answer, that's going to be disengaging. But if the alternative is even worse, like if you string that person along, then that will breed resentment and further disengagement, and that's just kind of a disaster. So I think the lesser of two evils is to be very direct and say, we're constrained. I'm so sorry. But also try to like validate, sometimes it is just symbolic. Like, so sometimes someone wants that promotion because they want the title or they want to be acknowledged for doing good work. And so to the extent that you can validate that, maybe that does get them something that they really want deep down. And then maybe there are other kind of non-compensation related things that you can give them. Maybe you can say, if it's really just because of budget constraints, maybe you can offer a title change. Or maybe you can say, I really want you to take the lead on this new project. Or you can, have more flexible work if that's what you want, or something that you can give. But I would at least symbolically gesture, your alignment with them.
I agree. And I think you also have to take into consideration by the time that employee is approaching that conversation, they've looked at all their options. And that could be like options externally. And you just want to make sure at the end of the day, you're showing up for your employees well, as much as showing up for the business. And especially if you want to really retain that employee, if they're really valuable and you don't want to lose them, even if you can't offer everything, I think what you recommended is a really great balanced approach.
Yeah. One other thing that I would say is that, there's another expression that, if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your company. And everything else is commentary. That is the essence of running a good business, like, standing on one foot. And, I think being proactive in promotions is sort of the first best thing to do. If you can offer someone a pay increase or a title increase before they're expecting it, wow, that like pays dividends. That creates so much goodwill. And that is something that I would encourage. If you can be proactive about this, think about like who might be overdue for something and try to beat them to the punch. Because if you could get there before they do, that creates like such a fantastic environment and an understanding that you take care of your people.
Mm-hmm. Proactive, not reactive. I love it.
Yeah.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us on All Things Work. This has been an enlightening conversation. Actually fun really to talk about even like some personal stuff that I didn't realize were, so common for people to, question as well. So thank you so much for breaking down a lot of the complex things and guiding us through, both the employee and people manager side. It's really helpful today.
Yeah, thank you. This was so fun.
All right, that's all for this week. We'll catch you next time. If you enjoyed our conversation today, be sure to subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast so you never miss a new episode. Also, did you know All Things Work is more than a podcast? That's right, we're also a weekly newsletter that includes in-depth articles and the latest research from SHRM to keep you in the know. Just head to shrm.org/allthingswork to sign up. Plus, follow SHRM on social media to view the latest clips and join the conversation on game-changing topics that are redefining the world of work.
Lattice is the HR platform where people plus AI succeed together to help your workforce crush it. No regrets. Visit lattice.com/no regrets.
SHRM.